The nurse had heard desperate requests before. She had heard patients ask for their children, for their spouses, for their parents, for someone to call home. But she had never heard a dying Navy SEAL ignore every familiar face in the room and make one request to a nurse he had known for less than an hour. His voice was barely audible. His breathing was shallow. His eyes struggled to remain open. But when he looked at the large German shepherd standing outside the hospital room, something changed in his expression. The fear disappeared. The pain seemed to fade for a moment. He looked at the nurse and whispered, "If I don't make it, take care of him." The nurse looked toward the hallway. The military working dog stood beside another SEAL, his dark eyes fixed on the room. Then she looked back at the wounded officer. "Your family can take care of him." He slowly shook his head. No. His fingers moved weakly against the blanket. "Not them." The nurse stared at him. "Then who?" He looked directly into her eyes. "You." And nobody in that hospital understood why. Not his commanding officer. Not the SEAL standing beside his dog. Not the family members waiting outside. Not even the nurse herself. But the reason he had chosen her would become one of the most emotional things she had ever experienced. If stories about military K9s, loyalty, sacrifice, and the extraordinary bond between service members and their dogs mean something to you, subscribe and stay with this story. Because this isn't simply about a dying soldier asking someone to care for his dog. It's about why, in the final hours of his life, he trusted a stranger with the one thing he couldn't bear to leave behind. Her name was Lena Hart. She was 31 years old and worked as a trauma nurse at Harbor Point Naval Medical Center. Lena had seen difficult cases before. She had learned not to react dramatically when an ambulance arrived. She knew how to keep her hands steady when a patient's condition changed. She knew how to speak calmly to frightened families. But nothing had prepared her for Commander Adrian Cole. Adrian was 42, a Navy SEAL officer with nearly 2 decades of service. He had been brought into the hospital shortly after dawn, following a serious training accident overseas. The medical team had stabilized him enough to bring him into intensive care, but his condition remained critical. His injuries required constant monitoring. Several doctors had already spoken with his family. The outlook was uncertain. Nobody used the word death around him, but everyone understood the possibility. And beside the ICU doors stood the one person, or rather, the one animal Adrian seemed most concerned about: Ghost, an 8-year-old, black and tan German Shepherd military working dog. Ghost had worked alongside Adrian for years. He wasn't a pet in the ordinary sense. He was a trained service animal, a working partner, a companion who had spent countless hours beside Adrian in training environments, transportation vehicles, military compounds, and operational assignments. And now Ghost stood outside the ICU with his handler's bloodless uniform folded beneath his paws. He hadn't eaten properly since Adrian had been brought in. He barely responded to anyone, except when someone mentioned Adrian. Then his ears would rise. Lena first noticed Ghost during her morning shift. She had been walking toward the ICU when she saw the German Shepherd sitting beside Senior Chief Marcus Bell, another SEAL who had arrived with him. Marcus looked exhausted. He had been awake most of the night. Lena stopped. "Is that Commander Cole's dog?" Marcus nodded. "Ghost. He's staying here?" "As long as they'll let him." Lena looked at the dog. Ghost stared through the ICU glass. "Does he understand what's happening?" Marcus looked down at him. "I don't know." He paused. "But he knows Adrian isn't walking back through that door." Lena didn't know what to say. She simply nodded. Then she continued toward the ICU. Inside the room, Adrian was awake, barely. Lena checked his monitors. She adjusted his IV line. She checked his oxygen support. Then she spoke softly. "Commander Cole?" His eyes opened. "Can you hear me?" He nodded. "Good." Lena checked his vital signs. "How are you feeling?" He gave the faintest smile. "Like I got hit by a truck." Lena smiled despite herself. "That's one way to describe it." His eyes closed again. She continued her work. For several minutes, everything was quiet. Then Adrian suddenly opened his eyes. "Ghost." Lena looked at him. "He's outside." His breathing became slightly faster. "Can I see him?" Lena hesitated. The medical team had restricted unnecessary movement, but the request was understandable. "I'll ask." His eyes closed again. "Thank you." Lena stepped outside. Marcus was still sitting beside Ghost. She explained that Adrian wanted to see him. Marcus stood. Ghost immediately became alert. "He's awake?" "Yes." Marcus looked at the ICU door, then at Ghost. "I don't know if they'll let him in." Lena nodded. "I'll ask the physician." Ghost stood. He was staring at the door. Marcus placed a hand on his harness. "Easy." The dog remained still. But his eyes never left the room. A few minutes later, the attending physician approved a brief supervised visit. Marcus walked Ghost toward the room. Lena opened the door. Ghost stopped at the threshold. For a moment he didn't move. Then he smelled the air. His ears rose. He recognized Adrian. Ghost walked slowly toward the bed. Adrian opened his eyes, and for the first time that morning, he smiled. "Hey, buddy." Ghost stood beside him. His head lowered. Adrian lifted one weak hand. Ghost carefully pressed his muzzle against it. Lena stood several feet away. She watched Adrian's fingers move slowly through the dog's fur. There was no dramatic speech, no exaggerated reaction, just a wounded soldier and his dog together for a few quiet minutes. Then Adrian whispered, "Good boy." Ghost's tail moved once. Adrian closed his eyes. Lena turned away briefly. She didn't want the family members outside to see her becoming emotional. After several minutes, Marcus gently touched Ghost's harness. "Come on." Ghost didn't move. Adrian opened his eyes. "Go with Marcus." Ghost looked at him. Adrian repeated it. "Go." The dog finally stepped backward. Marcus guided him toward the door. Ghost stopped again. Adrian looked at him. "I'll see you later." Marcus's eyes lowered. Lena noticed. He knew what Adrian didn't, or perhaps what Adrian refused to accept. That afternoon, Adrian's condition became more unstable. Doctors adjusted his treatment. Nurses monitored him constantly. His family arrived. His younger sister, Rachel Cole, stood outside the room for nearly an hour before finally asking to see him. Lena stepped aside. Rachel entered. She held Adrian's hand. "You scared us." Adrian smiled faintly. "Sorry." Rachel tried to laugh. "You're terrible at apologies." He looked at her. Then his expression became serious. "Rachel." "What?" "Ghost." She frowned. "What about him? If something happens to me." She immediately shook her head. "Don't say that. Listen." "No." "Rachel." She stopped. Adrian's voice was weak, but firm. "Take care of him." Rachel looked toward the window. "I will." Adrian shook his head. "No." She stared at him. "What do you mean, no?" "I need you to understand." His breathing became heavier. "Ghost isn't a normal dog." Rachel nodded. "I know. He needs someone who understands what he is." Rachel became quiet. "I'll find someone." Adrian closed his eyes. "Not someone," he whispered. "Her." Rachel looked confused. "Who?" Adrian opened his eyes. He looked toward the doorway. Lena was standing outside. Rachel followed his gaze. "The nurse?" Adrian nodded. Rachel stared at him. "You've known her for one day." "I know." "Adrian, you barely know her." He looked toward the hallway where Ghost was waiting, then back at Rachel. "I know enough." Rachel stepped outside. Lena was checking another patient's chart. Rachel approached. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "My brother wants you to take care of his dog." Lena looked surprised. "Ghost?" Rachel nodded. "I don't understand." "Neither do I." Lena looked toward Adrian's room. "Why me?" Rachel shook her head. He wouldn't explain. Lena looked at Ghost. The dog was sitting beside Marcus. His eyes were closed. But the moment Lena looked toward him, his eyes opened. Their eyes met. Ghost stood. Marcus looked over. The dog walked slowly toward Lena. Lena crouched. "Hey." Ghost stopped directly in front of her. He didn't jump. He didn't bark. He simply looked at her. Lena extended her hand. Ghost sniffed it, then leaned his head against her palm. Marcus stared. He had seen Ghost trust very few people. Lena gently stroked the dog's head. "Your dad wants me to look after you." Ghost remained still. Lena swallowed. "I don't know why he thinks I can." That evening, Lena returned to Adrian's room. He was awake, barely. She stood beside his bed. "Your sister told me what you asked." Adrian looked at her. "You'll do it?" Lena hesitated. "I don't know anything about being a K9 handler." "You don't need to." "Then why me?" Adrian looked at her for several seconds, then whispered, "Because you don't look at him like he's equipment." Lena said nothing. "You looked at him like he was scared." She swallowed. "He was." Adrian gave the smallest smile. "That's why." Lena pulled a chair beside the bed. "Tell me about him." Adrian's eyes softened. "He doesn't like loud noises." Lena listened. "He pretends he doesn't like thunderstorms." She smiled faintly. "He hates being left alone." A pause. "He sleeps near the door." Lena looked at him. "Why?" "Habit." Adrian's voice became weaker. "He always waited for me to come home." Lena lowered her eyes. "And if you don't?" Adrian looked toward the hallway. "Then he'll wait anyway." The words hung in the room. Lena felt something tighten in her chest. Adrian continued. "He trusts very few people. I noticed." "He trusts Marcus." Lena nodded. "And apparently you." She smiled faintly. "I don't know about that." Adrian looked at her. "He chose you." Lena didn't answer. Outside the room, Ghost was lying beside Marcus. His head rested on his paws. Adrian looked toward the glass, then whispered, "That's enough for me." The room became quiet. Lena adjusted his blanket. "You should rest." Adrian nodded. Before she could leave, his fingers gently caught her wrist. She stopped. He looked frightened for the first time. Not of death, of what would happen to Ghost afterward. "Promise me." Lena looked into his eyes. "What?" "Don't let them put him somewhere he doesn't belong." She understood. "You're asking me to protect him." Adrian nodded. "After me." Lena squeezed his hand. "I promise I'll do everything I can." His eyes closed. His grip loosened. And Lena remained beside him for another few seconds. She didn't know it yet, but that promise was about to become the most important promise she had ever made. Because before the night was over, Adrian's condition would suddenly deteriorate, and Lena would discover that Ghost wasn't the only one who had been waiting for someone to understand him. At 11:47 that night, the monitors changed. Lena was checking another patient's chart when she heard the alarm from Adrian's room. She turned immediately. A nurse rushed toward the ICU. "His pressure is dropping." Lena followed. Inside the room, the medical team moved quickly. Adrian's eyes were closed. His breathing had become shallow. The attending physician gave instructions while nurses adjusted medication and monitoring equipment. Lena stood at the bedside, focused on her work. Outside the glass doors, Ghost suddenly stood. Marcus looked toward the room. The dog's ears were forward. He had heard the alarms. He began pulling toward the ICU. Marcus held the leash. Easy. Ghost whined softly. He's in there. Marcus whispered. The dog stared through the glass. Inside, Adrian's condition continued to fluctuate. For several minutes, everyone worked to stabilize him. Then the numbers began improving. The alarms quieted. The physician finally stepped back. We've got him for now. Lena exhaled. She looked toward Adrian. His eyes remained closed, but he was breathing. She adjusted his blanket, then noticed Ghost still standing outside. The dog hadn't moved. Lena stepped into the hallway. Marcus looked at her. How bad? He stabilized. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Thank God. Ghost looked at Lena. She crouched. He's still here. Ghost approached the glass. Lena placed her palm against it. Ghost raised his nose toward the other side. For a moment, neither moved. Then Marcus said quietly, He knows. Lena looked at him. What? He knows Adrian is sick. She looked at Ghost. I think he does. The following morning, Adrian woke. His eyes opened slowly. Lena was beside the bed. Good morning. He looked at her, then toward the door. Ghost? He's here. Adrian's eyes closed again in relief. Good. Lena checked his vital signs. You gave everyone a scare last night. Adrian tried to smile. Sorry. You need to stop apologizing. I'll try. She smiled. That's better. He looked at her for a few seconds. Did you promise? Lena knew exactly what he meant. Yes. His eyes became wet. Thank you. Later that morning, Lena arranged another brief visit. Ghost entered with Marcus. The moment Adrian saw him, his face softened. Come here. Ghost approached the bed. He carefully rested his head against Adrian's hand. Adrian's fingers moved slowly through his fur. You're going to be okay. Ghost looked at him. Adrian glanced toward Lena. She'll take care of you. Lena stood quietly. Ghost remained beside the bed. Adrian's voice became weaker. You hear me? The dog gave no obvious response, but he stayed. Adrian looked at Lena. That's the thing about him. What? He doesn't leave. Lena looked at Ghost. I noticed. Adrian smiled. He waited for me once. When? After an operation. He paused. I was gone longer than expected. Lena listened. When I finally came back, he was sitting beside the gate. Adrian's eyes softened. He'd apparently refused to leave. Lena smiled. He was waiting. He always waits. Adrian's sister arrived that afternoon. Rachel entered the room carrying a small bag. She sat beside her brother. How are you? Still here. She smiled through tears. That works for me. Adrian looked toward the hallway. Did you meet Ghost? Rachel nodded. Of course. Does he like you? She laughed. He tolerates me. Adrian smiled. That means he likes you. Rachel looked at Lena. You really agreed to take care of him? Lena nodded. If necessary. Rachel looked at her brother. You trust her that much? Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. Rachel became quiet. Then she looked at Lena. Why? Lena shook her head. I don't know, Adrian answered for her. Because she sees him. Rachel looked at Ghost, then back at Lena. What does that mean? Adrian's voice was barely audible. She sees the dog. He paused. Not the uniform. Rachel didn't respond. Lena felt tears gathering in her eyes. She looked away. That evening, Adrian's commanding officer arrived. Captain Julian Shaw had served with Adrian for years. He stood beside the bed. How are you doing? Adrian smiled weakly. Still annoying everyone. Julian laughed. Good. They talked quietly about the unit. People Adrian missed training. Old stories, nothing dramatic, just memories between people who had spent years depending on each other. Eventually, Julian noticed Ghost outside. He's been there all day. Adrian nodded. He'll stay. Julian looked at Lena. Who is she? My nurse. Julian smiled. Adrian has mentioned you. Lena looked surprised. He has? Julian nodded. He doesn't usually trust people quickly. Lena glanced toward Adrian. I think Ghost decided first. Julian laughed. That sounds like him. As Julian prepared to leave, Adrian stopped him. Captain. Julian turned. If I don't recover, Julian immediately shook his head. Don't. Listen. Julian stepped closer. Adrian looked toward Ghost. Make sure he stays with someone who understands him. Julian nodded. We'll take care of him. Adrian's expression became serious. Not just anyone. Julian followed his gaze toward Lena. He understood. You've already decided. Adrian nodded. Julian looked at Lena, then back at Adrian. Understood. That night, the ICU became quieter. Most of the hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Lena walked through the corridor. Ghost was lying beside Marcus. She sat on the floor several feet away. Marcus looked at her. You're getting attached. Lena smiled. Maybe. Marcus looked at Ghost. He's attached too. She watched the dog. Why did Adrian choose me? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, because he knows what Ghost needs. That doesn't explain why me. Marcus thought for a moment. You stayed calm around him. I was doing my job. No. Marcus shook his head. You were doing more than that. He looked toward the ICU. Adrian noticed Lena became quiet. How? SEALs spend years learning how people behave under pressure. He smiled faintly. Adrian probably saw something in you before you realized it yourself. Lena looked down. I don't feel particularly brave. Marcus laughed softly. Neither did most of the people I served with. A few minutes later, Ghost stood. He walked toward Lena. She opened her hand. He placed his nose against it. Marcus smiled. He's made up his mind. Lena stroked his head. Apparently, 3 days passed. Adrian remained critically ill but stable. He spent more time awake. He talked more. And every day, Ghost visited him. The dog would walk into the room, approach the bed, and rest his head beside Adrian's hand. Sometimes Adrian talked to him. Sometimes he simply slept. Lena watched those visits from a distance. She noticed something. Adrian's breathing became calmer whenever Ghost was near. And Ghost became calmer whenever Adrian touched him. They regulated each other. It was a relationship built over years, something Lena could never replace. She didn't want to. She only wanted to make sure it survived if Adrian didn't. On the 4th evening, Adrian asked Lena to sit beside him. She pulled up a chair. He looked tired. There's something I need to tell you. Okay. If I don't make it. Lena swallowed. You've already asked me to care for Ghost. I know. What else? Adrian stared at the ceiling. I don't want him to become someone's project. Lena listened. He isn't a trophy. I understand. He needs work. She nodded. He needs structure. Yes. He needs someone who knows when to leave him alone. Lena smiled. Yes. Adrian looked at her. And he needs someone who won't feel sorry for him. That surprised her. Why? Because he's still a working dog. He paused. Don't turn him into something he isn't. Lena nodded. I won't. Adrian closed his eyes. Good. Then he opened them again. You'll have help. From Marcus and the unit. Lena nodded. You won't be doing it alone. She smiled. That's good. Adrian looked toward Ghost. He'll be okay. Lena followed his gaze. I'll make sure. Adrian looked at her again. No. His voice was weak. Promise me you'll let him help you too. Lena didn't understand. What do you mean? Adrian smiled faintly. When you have a bad day. He took a breath. Sit beside him. Lena's eyes became wet. He'll know. She nodded. I promise. For the first time since entering the hospital, Adrian seemed completely at peace. He closed his eyes. Ghost rested beside the bed. Lena sat quietly nearby. Outside, Marcus watched through the glass. The room was peaceful. Then, just before midnight, Adrian's condition changed again. This time, much more severely. The monitors began alarming. The medical team rushed in. Marcus immediately moved Ghost away from the door. Lena stood at the bedside. The physician gave instructions. The room filled with movement. Ghost began whining. Marcus held him firmly. "Easy, buddy." Inside, Lena worked alongside the team. Adrian's blood pressure dropped. His breathing became dangerously unstable. The team responded immediately. Minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Finally, the physician stepped back. "He's responding." The alarms began to quiet. Lena looked at Adrian. His eyes were closed. But he was alive. She exhaled. Outside, Ghost lowered himself onto the floor. His head rested between his paws. He waited. Hours later, just before dawn, Adrian opened his eyes. Lena was there. He looked toward the door. She nodded. "Ghost is waiting." Adrian smiled. "Good." Lena leaned closer. "You scared everyone again." He gave a weak laugh. "I'm getting good at that." She smiled. Then he looked at her seriously. "You know what? What? I think I chose the right person." Lena shook her head. "You barely knew me. I watched you." She became quiet. "When?" "Every time you entered the room." He paused. "You talked to patients who couldn't answer. You stayed beside people who were afraid. You never treated Ghost like he was a problem." His eyes met hers. "You didn't need to know me. You already showed me who you were." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. Adrian squeezed it weakly. Then he whispered, "Take care of my boy." Lena nodded. "I will." And outside the room, Ghost quietly lifted his head as if he had heard the promise. Dawn slowly entered the ICU through the narrow windows. The hospital had become quieter. The overnight alarms had stopped. The medical team had stabilized Adrian again. But nobody was pretending the danger had passed. Lena stood beside his bed, watching the monitor. Adrian's eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow but steady. Outside the room, Ghost remained beside Marcus. He hadn't left. Lena stepped into the hallway. Ghost immediately lifted his head. She crouched beside him. "He's still here." Ghost stared through the glass. Lena placed her hand gently against his neck. "And he's still fighting." Ghost leaned into her. Marcus watched silently. After a moment, he said, "You know something." Lena looked at him. "What's that?" "Adrian didn't choose you because he thought you could replace him." Lena's eyes moved toward the ICU. "I know. He chose you because he knew you wouldn't try." She looked down at Ghost. Marcus continued, "That's probably the highest compliment he could give you." Lena didn't answer. She simply rested her hand on Ghost's head. The next several days became a strange rhythm. Adrian would wake. Lena would check him. Ghost would visit. Adrian would talk to him. Then Adrian would sleep. Sometimes the visits lasted only a few minutes. Other times, Ghost remained beside the bed for nearly half an hour. The dog seemed to understand the routine. When Adrian was awake, Ghost stayed close. When Adrian slept, Ghost rested quietly. And whenever Lena entered the room, Ghost would look at her first, then at Adrian, as if checking that everything was still okay. One afternoon, Adrian's sister Rachel approached Lena. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course." They stepped into a quiet corner of the corridor. Rachel folded her arms. "I need to ask you something." Lena nodded. "Okay. Why did he choose you?" Lena gave a small smile. "I've asked myself the same question." Rachel looked through the glass toward Adrian. "My brother trusts almost nobody." "I noticed." He doesn't even talk about his feelings. Lena smiled faintly. Neither do most people in his position. Rachel looked at her. You've become important to him. Lena shook her head. His dog is important to him. Rachel smiled sadly. You're not understanding, she paused. He's trusting you with something he can't control. Lena looked at Ghost. Maybe. Rachel nodded. Then thank you. Lena's eyes became wet. You don't have to thank me. I do. Rachel looked toward her brother. Because if he doesn't come home, her voice broke. Lena gently touched her arm. Don't give up yet. Rachel nodded. I'm trying. That evening, Adrian had one of his better days. He was awake for nearly an hour. His voice was stronger. He even joked with Lena. You know, what? You're very bossy. She smiled. I'm your nurse. Exactly. She laughed. You need to follow instructions. He smiled. I've been following instructions for 20 years. Then you should be good at it. Adrian laughed softly. Ghost lifted his head. Lena smiled. See? Even he agrees with me. Adrian looked at Ghost. Traitor. For the first time in days, Lena heard genuine laughter in the room. It was quiet, but real. Then Adrian became serious. Bring Ghost closer. Lena nodded. Marcus guided the dog beside the bed. Adrian placed his hand against Ghost's neck. Buddy. Ghost looked at him. I need you to listen. The dog remained still. Adrian looked at Lena. He's going to have a hard time. Lena nodded. I know. He'll look for me. I know. He may stop eating. We'll watch him. He may wait by the door. Lena swallowed. Then we'll sit with him. Adrian's eyes became wet. You really mean that? Yes. He looked at her for several seconds. Thank you. Adrian rested his hand against Ghost's head. You've been the best partner I could have asked for. Ghost closed his eyes. Adrian took a slow breath. I wish I had more time. Lena looked away. She couldn't hold back the tears anymore, Adrian noticed. Hey. She looked back. Don't cry. She smiled through the tears. I'm trying. You have to be strong for him. Lena laughed softly. I think you're giving me too much responsibility. Adrian smiled. You can handle it. That night, Adrian's condition deteriorated again. This time, the doctors explained to the family that his body was struggling to recover from the severity of his injuries. Treatment continued. But the possibility that he might not survive became impossible to ignore. Lena stood outside the room with Rachel and Marcus. The attending physician spoke quietly. We're doing everything medically appropriate. Rachel nodded. Marcus looked through the glass. Ghost was lying beside Adrian's bed. Lena watched him. The dog hadn't moved. Later, the family was allowed inside. Rachel held Adrian's hand. Marcus stood near the foot of the bed. Lena remained nearby. Adrian opened his eyes. He looked at each person, then at Ghost. His voice was barely audible. Thank you. Rachel squeezed his hand. Don't say goodbye. Adrian smiled. I'm not. He looked toward Lena. I'm just saying thank you. Lena nodded. He looked at Marcus. Take care of them. Marcus's jaw tightened. I will. Then Adrian looked at Ghost. The dog raised his head. Adrian whispered, Good boy. Ghost slowly placed his muzzle against Adrian's hand. Adrian closed his eyes. The room remained quiet. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then Adrian's breathing became weaker. The medical team came in. Lena stepped aside but remained nearby. Rachel began crying. Marcus lowered his head. Ghost remained beside the bed. Adrian opened his eyes one final time. His gaze moved toward Lena. She stepped closer. He whispered something. She leaned down. What? His voice was almost impossible to hear. Don't let him think I left him. Lena's heart broke. She held his hand. I won't. Adrian looked toward Ghost, then back at her. A faint smile appeared, and then his eyes closed. The room became completely still. The monitors changed. The physician stepped forward. The medical team continued their efforts. But after several minutes, the attending physician finally stopped. He looked at the family. His voice was quiet. "I'm sorry." Rachel broke down. Marcus turned away. Lena stood frozen. She had cared for dying patients before, but this felt different because she remembered the promise. She looked at Ghost. He was still standing beside the bed. He didn't understand the medical words. He only knew that Adrian wasn't moving. Lena crouched beside him. She placed one hand against his neck. Ghost looked at her. She whispered, "He didn't leave you." Her voice broke. "He asked me to stay." Ghost stared at her, then slowly lowered his head against her shoulder. Lena wrapped her arms around him. For the first time since the hospital admission, Ghost began to whine, a quiet, broken sound. Lena held him tighter. "I know," she whispered. "I know." The next morning, the hospital felt different. Adrian's room was empty. His belongings had been collected. His uniform was folded carefully. His identification card had been placed inside a small envelope. And Ghost was sitting outside the room, exactly where Adrian had said he would wait. Lena found him there. She sat beside him. For several minutes, neither moved. Then Ghost rested his head against her leg. Lena gently stroked his fur. "You waited for him." Ghost closed his eyes. She whispered, "He would have been proud of you." The military unit handled the arrangements. Adrian received full military honors. His family stood together. Marcus stood with the SEAL team. Ghost was not permitted to participate in every part of the ceremony. But afterward, Marcus brought him to the memorial area. Lena was there too. Ghost stood beside her. A folded American flag was presented to Rachel. She held it against her chest. Then she looked toward Ghost. She walked over. She placed one hand on his head. "Take care of him." Lena nodded. "We will." Rachel looked at her. "Together?" Lena smiled. Together. Months passed. Ghost didn't simply become Lena's dog. He remained a military working dog. His care was coordinated through the military. His training continued. His medical appointments continued. Marcus remained involved. The unit remained responsible for his future. Lena never pretended otherwise. But whenever Ghost had a difficult day, she was there. When he waited near doors, she sat with him. When thunderstorms made him restless, she stayed nearby. When he stopped eating after a difficult anniversary, she didn't force him. She simply remained present. Slowly, Ghost began trusting the new routine. One evening, Marcus found Lena sitting on the floor beside Ghost. The dog was asleep. Marcus smiled. "You know what Adrian would say?" Lena looked up. "What?" "He'd tell you you're spoiling him." She laughed. "I'm not." Marcus looked at the dog. "You're definitely spoiling him." Lena smiled. "Maybe a little." Marcus sat down beside them. For a while they said nothing. Then he looked at her. He made the right choice. Lena's eyes became emotional. "I don't know about that." Marcus shook his head. "I do." A year after Adrian's death, the unit held a small memorial. A plaque was placed near the military working dog facility. It carried Adrian's name. Below it was a simple line. He served beside his K9. He trusted those who understood him. Ghost stood beside Marcus. Lena stood nearby. Rachel attended. When the ceremony ended, Rachel walked over to Lena. She handed her a small photograph. It was an old picture of Adrian and Ghost. Lena looked at it. Rachel smiled. "Keep it." Lena shook her head. "It belongs to your family." Rachel shook her head. "No." She pointed toward Ghost. "He chose you too." Lena looked at the dog. Ghost was watching her. She smiled. "Then I'll keep it safe." That evening, Lena sat beside Ghost outside the facility. The sun was setting. Ghost rested his head on her lap. She ran her fingers gently through his fur. "Your dad trusted me." Ghost closed his eyes. "I still don't know why." She looked at the photograph. "Maybe he saw something I didn't." Ghost shifted closer. Lena smiled. "Maybe he knew I'd understand you." She looked toward the fading sunlight. "And maybe," she paused, "he knew I'd never let you believe he abandoned you." If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel for more emotional military K9 stories about loyalty, sacrifice, and the bonds that continue even after a soldier is gone. And if you've ever loved an animal who helped you through the hardest moment of your life, tell us about them in the comments. Sometimes sharing that memory keeps a little piece of them alive. Years later, Ghost would eventually retire. He would no longer work operational assignments. His movements would become slower. Silver would appear around his muzzle. But one habit never disappeared. Every evening, he would wait near the door. Lena would sit beside him. Sometimes they would stay there for several minutes. Neither needed to speak. They both knew what they were waiting for. Not Adrian, himself. That wasn't possible. They were waiting for the memory, the footsteps they could still imagine. The voice that once said, "Good boy," and the promise that had started inside an ICU room. A wounded SEAL had looked at a nurse he barely knew and trusted her with the one thing he loved most, not because she was family. Not because she was a handler, not because she had promised to replace him, but because, in the brief moments he had watched her, he had seen something: patience, compassion, strength without cruelty, and the ability to look at a military working dog and see more than a uniform, a leash, or a set of commands. He saw someone who would understand Ghost, someone who would sit beside him when he waited, someone who would stay when he was afraid, someone who would never tell him to forget. And Lena kept that promise. Not perfectly, not alone, but faithfully, because Adrian had never asked her to replace him. He had asked her to make sure his dog never believed he had been forgotten. And every evening, when Ghost rested his head against her leg, she knew she had kept her word. Some promises are spoken in the final moments of a life. The strongest ones are kept long after the voice that made them is gone.